Here we are, guys. Final day of the season. Game week 38. ESPN's football forecast with myself, James Allcott, Harry Symeou, and Kim Kothari. We're going to talk about so many things this week, and we're going to kick off with your team, Harry. It's the hope that kills you is a good old phrase. You still got a little bit of hope left when it comes to Arsenal versus Everton? And of course, we're going to do the other game as well.
You've got to have a bit of hope, James.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what's the
Why
point
are we
in turning
here?
up? Yeah,
Why
exactly.
are we here?
What's the point in turning up if you don't have any hope? But to say that there's only an outside chance, I think is fair. Manchester City have been so relentless. You looked at the Spurs away game and you thought maybe potential banana skin until it became apparent that Spurs, at least their supporters, weren't interested at all. The Fulham away game was one I was looking at, maybe. And they've come through both of those games with relative ease. So, yeah, there is some hope. I just hope that Arsenal turn up on Sunday and do their job because I think it'd be really difficult to swallow and to take if Arsenal were to drop points and then Manchester City did too.
I think, so one question on the back of that is, what percentage of hope are you at? You can give me a number.
Probably about 10%.
10%? Really?
10%,
that low?
Yeah. I think.
Wow.
I just look at West Ham and I think they're a side that have conceded, I think, more goals than anyone outside of the bottom three this season, which is obviously, it doesn't bode well when you're going away to City. David Moyes made some comments, didn't he, the other week, that he wouldn't even be able to stop City's under-14s or something.
Yeah.
Feels like the team have checked out a little bit. Obviously, he's leaving at the end of the season. We know that as well. So I don't have much faith in West Ham. And I also look at Arsenal's fixture, and I don't think this is an easy fixture.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think what I would say about both these games, because you kind of have to keep bringing them back together, because of course it matters what happens in both of them at the same time. I think both with the opponents as well. It's an interesting stat, the fact that they've conceded the amount of goals that they have, West Ham, because I would put them in a similar bracket to Everton in the sense that, structured, okay if they haven't got the ball, tenacity at the right times, physicality at the right times, and can be stubborn at times as well. Of the two games, do you think, on paper at least, Arsenal got a tougher fixture than Man City in their game against Everton?
I think they're pretty equal, to be completely honest. I think Everton have had an amazing run of form the last 6 games. I think they've won 5 and they've conceded 1 in that period of time. They've been absolutely fantastic. They've scored the second most set pieces after Arsenal. I think they've got the second most clean sheets as well. So they've been very, very solid defensively and they are a good side. But I think when it comes to the last day, when one team has something to play for, like Arsenal do, I know there probably is, as you say, about 10% I think is right. But they have something to play for, and Everton have absolutely nothing to play for. We know that they're not as good away from home, so I can't imagine that being a particular challenge. On the other hand, when it comes to the City game, West Ham, I would say, and I was saying off air before, I think West Ham at home is probably one of maybe 2 games that you would want right now as a Manchester City player and fan. Moyes is obviously leaving. The players have done all they can. I think they can't get any further than what they are already in the league table. But the thing is, we've seen it before with the Aston Villa game, and we've seen it with the QPR game. Manchester City make it difficult for themselves on the final day of the season, and can they do it again? I was thinking it even watching the Spurs game, and I was saying to my brother, I was watching it with my brother, and I was just thinking, can they actually just continually do this, where they win the last game of the season? I'm not sure. I think it's going to be actually more difficult than you think, and I can imagine City being 1 or 2 down at some point in the game.
The fixture at Goodison Park was an interesting one. 74% possession for Arsenal, only scored 1 goal, only created 1 big chance in that game as well. In the year before, I was saying this to a friend the other day who's an Everton fan, I really believe that as much as it was about Pep and seeing what he's done in terms of the size that he's brought into his team, I really think that first game for Sean Dyche against Arsenal at Goodison Park, where they beat them 1-0, and Tarkowski, I think it was back post, bullied Odegaard in the air. I think it was a little moment for Arteta, especially against his former club, where he went, I need more size in this team. And I think that's been a really big part of their sustained effort this year, is the ability at set pieces. Everton have only conceded 36.6 open play XG, which is the 4th least of any team. So going into this, I think one thing that Arsenal have been able to do regularly is get that first goal, and or also get goals not from open play but from set pieces. Does that make you a little bit concerned in terms of the opponent that you're playing, that it's an Everton side that will be a bit more comfortable against set pieces as opposed to a team that struggles with them? Because it has been such a weapon for you this year.
Yeah, it's been a massive weapon for Arsenal, and you're right to mention that Everton are pretty good at sort of dealing with that type of thing. The physical side has never been something that any Sean Dyche team really has lacked. It's something that he places a lot of value on. And I think you're right to mention that Mikel Arteta at some point kind of had a wake-up call to say, actually we need a bit more physicality. And he's been building towards creating a team like that for a number of years. If you think of the signings, and then you think of how he's converted centre-backs into fullbacks and tried to make that work as well. I also think it's a big part of the reason why Kai Havertz spent the first half of the season in midfield, rather than him going for Smith Rowe or Vieira, who are maybe a little bit more comfortable in those areas. They both lack physicality. So it's a big thing, and I think that, Everton are one of those opponents that can make it awkward for you and difficult for you. And the reason I feel Arsenal's game is harder is because Everton have shown throughout the season that they can be resilient. Take away the points deduction, they're in a pretty comfortable position.
Yeah.
West Ham were that under David Moyes last year and the year before, but it feels like they've just checked out a bit and they've lost some of the core strengths that they had.
I don't think there's going to be many goals in this one. I think the one thing I would say, it being at the Emirates is very, very useful. But the fact that in terms of set pieces, you've got the opposition and could very likely score from a set piece as well. But in terms of you guys conceding from set pieces, you're really, really low in that metric as well. You are the best defence. And we saw the apex of the size of that team in the Man United game, where it's like, you probably had 3 more gears you could kind of go into if you wanted to kind of go for it. But now we'll chuck Kivior on, we'll go to the back five, we're all 6'4", coming see if you can get through us. We're 1-0 up. The management of the games has been very, very good, which I think has allowed them to be better in tenser situations, and this will definitely be one. One person that I feel like Arteta's really lent on in the run-in has been Leandro Trossard. I think for that level of composure that he's been able to bring, I wouldn't have expected a world where you've got a run-in and Martinelli gets dropped. I think that speaks volumes for Trossard. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. I think Leandro Trossard's proven himself to be incredibly efficient in front of goal, which you need in the games where you're trying to win by the finest of margins, difficult contests, difficult competitions, and you've got an opportunity. Comes along, you've got to take them, right? We've seen it so many times in the past. I mean, how many times have I gone to Old Trafford in the past and come away thinking Arsenal played really well but didn't win the game? Leandro Trossard got one chance in the game and he put it away, but that's not the only time he's done that. I think he's been great, but I also think Martinelli's form has dropped off a little bit. And I think Mikel Arteta had the luxury, obviously, of being able to bring somebody else in who could, make sure that the level's just as high. The only thing I'd say Trossard lacks is I don't think defensively he gives you as much as Martinelli does on that left side. And I think that's why you've seen late on in games Mikel Arteta opt, despite Trossard having a good game, to take him off for the last 20 minutes if they're in a commanding position and go with Gabriel Martinelli.
What do Arsenal need to worry about when it comes to Everton for you?
You know what? They're obviously a very, very stubborn team, and we know how Sean Dyche sets up their teams. I think when it comes to this game, I think there are external factors which make this game easier for Arsenal, and one of that is the emotional factor. They're playing in front of their fans who've supported them throughout the whole season.
Is that a help or a hindrance, though?
I think it's a massive help, because I think Arteta will be very, very disappointed that Arsenal are most likely not going to be Premier League champions. And I think he will say to his players, there is a small chance that we can win it here. And even if we're not going to, let's show our supporters who've stuck to us thick and thin through this season, let's show them how good we are and let's just play our football. And if Arsenal do that, I just don't think anyone in the league really is good enough to match Arsenal when they're playing at their absolute pomp. So when you say it's going to be low scoring, I don't actually agree. I can imagine it's going to be a bit of a sort of... There might be a bit sombre, but I think it will also be like a very supportive atmosphere. I think the fans are going to get round the players. I think maybe a couple of early goals for Arsenal, and I think it'll be a bit of a breeze, to be honest.
That could totally happen. I think you're right. I think Arteta will go, and he's smart enough with his sort of man management and psychological management to go, it doesn't really matter. It does matter, of course it does, but it's irrelevant if we don't win our game of football. So let's celebrate the season that we've had, because I think there is a lovely feeling when it comes to that. The thing that irks at me a little bit with the Everton side of it is I think Sean Dyche should be licking his lips at this. Bit of like spotlight there. Think of say like the Liverpool game where again they didn't have too much of the ball, but they knew how to hurt the opposition. And Dominic Calvert-Lewin been in the shot window a little bit there. I think if it gets to half time, a bit like the Tottenham Man City game, it all worked out, didn't it? But half time, You weren't chilled, were you?
Oh, believe me.
Yeah.
The least chilled man in the entirety of the country.
So I think this is the harder fixture. I think Everton have been impressive and gone under the radar because of the points deduction. You think they're in a relegation battle. I think I've actually made that mistake myself. So if it gets to half time, which it could easily get to, and it's tricky, you've been in that stadium a million times. Do you think there could be any kind of slight change, or will it just be powered through because you're proud of the team this year?
I think now more than ever, I'm confident that the crowd will rally behind the team and back them and help them get over the line. In years gone by, there was those kind of murmurs of frustration that used to come from the stands and certainly used to find their way onto the pitch and impact players. So I'm confident that the fans will turn up on Sunday and be right behind the team, because whatever you say, however this ends, Arsenal started the year, in a position where they could push in the sort of race. And of the 18 games they would have played in 2024 in the Premier League, if they're to win on Sunday, they'd have won 16, drawn 1 at Manchester City, and only lost to Aston Villa and still not be crowned champions. Hit 89 points.
Yeah.
They've won more games already than the Invincibles won in that 2003-2004 season. So I think whatever way you look at it, you've just got to be proud of what they've managed to achieve this season.
And I think you mentioned it before as well, and I think one of the most important things going into this game is Arteta and the players cannot afford to not win this game and then look at their phones and seeing that West Ham have drawn against City, and that's why they didn't win the league. And that's why I'm very, very, very confident that they'll be completely up for it, and I think they'll just be too much for Everton.
Okay, so score predictions then, Kim. You seem pretty...
Yeah, I'd say I think a 3-4-0 for Arsenal.
Yeah. What are you saying, Harry?
I'll go for an Arsenal 2, Everton 0.
I think there's always twists on these days. I think it'll be 2-1 Arsenal, late goal. What do you guys think? Let us know.